Hello ladies and gents, it's Jake here, and today I have a special video for you guys. Initially I wasn't sure if I was going to make this video or not, as I wanted to release it before now, but I thought I might have missed the mark on it, and after some contemplation as well as some encouragement from a good friend of mine, Ronan Unchained, whose channel I'll have linked below, I decided to go forward with the video. So, a little over a week ago, April 18th, was Superman Day, and while I've done a lot of Batman-related videos on my channel, there are a lot of other characters that I love just as much and who are just as important to me, and Superman happens to be one of them. And in this video, I want to tell you all exactly why that is, and how I came to love Superman. So my exposure to Superman was a little bit fragmented, as I believe my first exposure was watching the Reeve movies, or at least the first few, and then because I was born in between when the Reeve movies ended and before Brendan Routh took on the role for his one movie, so I had seen a good amount of Reeve and Routh Superman when I was little, but not to the same extent that I saw, other live-action superhero portrayals, namely the Keaton Batman films, the Bryan Singer X-Men trilogy, the original one, as well as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I had seen those a lot more. And at the time, Superman as a character just didn't really resonate with me. The most I had gotten exposed to the character beyond that was watching the Justice League cartoon from the early 2000s, and I thought Superman was cool enough, but I think at the time, I just appreciated him really just kind of in a vacuum with that Justice League team, like as a part of that group, that unified team, but not really as a character in his own right. And I think as the years went on, especially when you get into things like New 52 and Injustice, you see Superman portrayed a lot less optimistic, a lot less, friendly, a lot, some would even say less heroic. And I think just because of what was going on with the character around that time, I wasn't really that invested in him, and that could be a fault of mine, but I think there was definitely some influence from how the character was being depicted, and then that led into the early 2010s when you got the DCEU portrayal from Henry Cavill, and then you saw Zack Snyder's depiction of Superman, which there are things that I like about that depiction, there are things I don't like about that depiction, but I won't say that that was the prime source of influence. I played the Injustice games a lot, and of course Superman is depicted as a very evil character in those, at least the one that prime universe, if you want to call it, the main Earth that Injustice takes place on. That Superman is portrayed as very far from heroic, and I think I was just kind of at a point in my life too where I was a lot more cynical about things, and just kind of had that same cynical view of the world, that I didn't really feel connected with a character who stood for, who in his prime, stood for the opposite of those things. So it was a little bit of a weird time for me to be exposed to that character, and then I think what really kind of turned me around goes back to what happened in my personal life in 2020. So in the fall of 2020, going from October and then going all the way into the new year, a few weeks into January, I had experienced, of course the world at that time was in a shutdown, so there was a lot of uncertainty and kind of a feeling of hopelessness going around a lot of people. But in my personal life, from October to the end of January, I experienced 3 back-to-back family deaths in middle of October, I lost my uncle. A month after that, right before Thanksgiving, I lost my grandmother. And then, as you guys can probably imagine, the holidays were pretty bad that year. And then, like 3 weeks after Christmas, I lost my grandfather. So that whole period, and then the fallout from that, put me into definitely one of the darkest spots I've ever been in my life. And it was in January of 2021 when my grandfather passed away, and then right after that, like a month later, is when the pilot of Superman and Lois aired. And the version of Superman that you saw in that series, we had of course seen Tyler Hoechlin play the character in shows and crossovers before then, but he never really got into something of his own. So this was the first time that you got to see him as the main character and not a side character, and not just an additional hero in a big crowd of heroes like you saw in crossovers. And something about that portrayal at that point in my life, I think I just got exposed to that at probably, it couldn't have been a better time for me to get exposed to Superman and Lois, because it portrayed this character who was always full of hope, always tried to do the right thing, but you saw his struggles. So you saw the part of him that made him super, but you also saw the man underneath. And yeah, I don't have a script, by the way, for this video. This is me just kind of going off the cuff. So if I sound like I'm, kind of going from point to point a little sporadically, that's because that's what it is. I didn't want this to, sound rehearsed or anything. This is just kind of me telling you guys my story and like what my perspective on this is, because I think it's a pretty unique one. But at that point, after I had experienced those family deaths, I was a bit of a recluse, and I was definitely striving to find some form of hope, some light at the end of that tunnel, because I really just didn't feel like doing anything with my life at that moment. I just felt stuck. Felt like my, world was just crumbling around me from every direction. And I found comfort, week to week watching this character who, despite the overwhelming odds that he faced, he was able to find the strength to keep moving. And it made me think of something that I had seen a long time ago. In one of the, this is going to sound like a strange point, but hopefully you guys can see how it's related. I thought back to the DVD bonus extras for one of the Spider-Man films. I believe it was the second one. And in one of the bonus interviews that you see on those discs, of course, that those films came out like right after 9/11. The first and second one did, because the first one released in the year after, and then the second film was 2004. And in one of those interviews, Sam Raimi described it as being, scary times where we, seek heroes that we can reach out to for some form of comfort and that we can relate to. I'm paraphrasing here. And he said that was, in his mind, why the world was, so smitten with Spider-Man. Well, I think, with what the world faced throughout all of 2020 and into the into the years that followed that, there were definitely points where the world was kind of striving to find that sense of hope too. And it's because of that I think, in this day and age that we live in now, I think Superman is just as, I think he's more important than ever. Because, we all try to find that sense of hope, that thing to keep us off the edge, that thing to, push us forward. And really kind of remind us what life is about, finding the joy, the wonder, and just that hope that life can give. Because, as they say in the Superman and Lois show, life goes by very fast. And it was around that time that I started picking up some of the Superman Rebirth comics too. When I started getting into that show, I started collecting more of those comics, and then reading more into them, because I had when it came to Superman comics, I read them a little bit when I was little, and then with all the different resources that we would get later on, with internet, like YouTube read-alongs, things like that, I would just kind of take, cliff notes and snippets of what was happening in those comics. And because of where I was at that point in my life, I didn't really care to read them. But with what happened in my life from the end of 2020 to start of 2021, when I started becoming, more attached to that kind of character again, I think that's what kind of encouraged me to read those comics. And it, along with the show that I was watching at the time, kind of, I guess, reinvigorated a lot of the positive feelings within me that the character of Superman embodies. That sense of joy, of hope, just that love for the world, and it's part of what got me out of that funk that I was at that point in my life, where I was just kind of hating everything. It felt like I was just going on autopilot, where there was just so much uncertainty, and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself at that point. And I think I would definitely be, I might still be in that worst mindset that I was back then. I could very well still be there today if those feelings hadn't hit me when they did, and I hadn't discovered that show when I did. I know it's corny and cheesy to say that TV shows or fictional characters or films or whatever it may be, it can pull you out of a bad spot in life. Despite that, I still think it's very much true, because I've seen people who were close to jumping off the edge, and there's that one piece of media that they found at the right time that pulled them back, that made them, that gave them something to appreciate. And I'm not saying that my situations in life that I was going through were more severe or otherwise than what anybody else was dealing with at that point, because we all have our own tragedies, we all have things that we go through, and we all have different ways of dealing with it. But coming from me, I think that that's something that really helped me out at that point in my life and gave me kind of a better outlook on the world, and kind of just made me, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say is it made me feel better at a time where I was like the furthest thing from feeling good that I've probably ever been. Just because, like after those three, like back-to-back deaths, right as soon as I was just starting to process one, then came another, and then another. So it was just like I kept getting hit repeatedly while I was down. So I think, not only because of what was happening at the time in my life, but, I had gotten a little bit older too, and, a little, a part of just that general cynicism of the world was kind of fading at that point. And I kind of just had to look at things where, like I had to kind of make those efforts to find the bits of positivity and optimism that I could. They weren't just gonna, show up at my front door. But you know, going through, and I'm going to say a lot in this, by the way. I probably already have a lot. But I realized that I kind of had to make those efforts. They weren't just going to show up for me, but because of what was going on at the time, and because of how I was exposed to it, I think I enjoyed making those efforts, if that makes any sense. And I think Superman has just become more and more important to me over the last few years, you know, especially with all the uncertainty that we face, you know, in our day-to-day lives. You know, something that really helps us through it is, you know, our friends, our family, and our loved ones. And, you know, in so many different Superman portrayals, you see that he refers to himself, you know, as a friend. And I think that's, you know, one of the things that really gets us through our tough moments, and something that, you know, deep down, like, we all kind of strive for those things, even if on the surface, you know, we'll say the opposite, or, you know, think that we would rather be alone. I think that, you know, it's always better, you know, whenever you have people in your corner and you don't have to deal with those things alone, because, you know, having all those people around in your life, it can give you something to live for, and having, you know, that right person in your life can help you rediscover who you are, and maybe discover what your aspirations are and what you want to live for in your life as well, to where you can either find your purpose, or maybe rediscover your purpose, or find something new about your purpose that maybe you didn't see before. And it's weird that fictional characters can kind of give us those epiphanies, but I think it really can happen. So yeah, I don't want to ramble too long on this. I know it probably came off as a bit of a ramble, but that's a big part of why Superman is so important to me, because I, you know, had brief exposures of the character when I was little, into the, you know, whenever I was growing up. But I think that the main reason why the character is so important to me now is because I got reintroduced to him at the moment in my life where I needed what he embodied in my life the most. And I was able to see those physical embodiments through those portrayals, and it really helped me get a new outlook on the world and realize a lot about the world and how much of a gift life really is. So yeah, I know this came, you know, a little bit late, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. Are any of you guys, you know, fans of Superman? Did you find love for that character in a similar way that I did? You know, maybe was it in a very different way that I did? You know, share whatever you feel like. You know, if something is too personal, and I'm not pressuring you to write it, you know, feel free to disclose whatever you would like in the comments. I appreciate anybody who got to this point in the video. And as a question of the day, I guess, is what is it that resonates with you about Superman the most? What about the character sticks with you? So with that said, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like, drop any thoughts you have in the comments, share this video with your friends, and if you would like to see more, then please make sure to subscribe, and I will be back with you guys with more of our regular videos as they come. Peace out.